created. That's kind of a heavy story, but in any case, at a certain point, this group of souls who had come, this sort of rebellious, light-seeking group of souls, wanted to journey homeward again, but they were unable to do it. They were sort of enmeshed through their own fall into this realm, perhaps for learning and growth. And at that point, they turned back to the creative source. They overshadowed the animals, the primates, but turning to a spiritual source, physical form was brought into being in which they could really come into the earth. And that all leads up to the fact that each androgynous soul supposedly split itself into the 5 races, the red, white, brown, yellow, and black. And each of these points of the star went into one of the 5 gardens of Eden. The red being Atlantis, maybe the yellow was the Gobi, and so on and so forth. And each of these points of the star, they came in perhaps as 2 and 1, male and female together. At some point they separated. So if this was you came in Atlantis in the red race and you were a feminine soul, part of the soul, your twin soul would be the masculine pole of that soul, and you would have separated at some point. But you're really very closely complementary parts of the same energy. And conversely, you have, in addition to this, you have some sister souls and brother souls. And those would be people with common purposes, but not quite as close or complementary as the twin soul. The twin soul belief permeates all cultures of the earth. It's again that, the belief in the eternal love, the right lady, the one man, that each of us, many of us have wondered and searched for. It's a belief prominent in all cultures of the earth. Plato has the first written record of it in the Western civilization, but earlier on in the Orient, the yin-yang principle was sort of emblematic of the twin soul, the male and female principles which are interwoven throughout all the ages. In Egypt, there was Isis and Osiris, who actually may have been brother and sister soul, but who represented to the Egyptian people this image. In India, it was Rama and Sita. In the Hebrew biblical creation story, it's interesting that the Hebrew word for rib, where Eve was supposed to come out of the rib of Adam, in the original Hebrew, it was the side, like one side of an already existing person. So this person was the other side of that person. And the Mexican Indians talk about an original soul that separated itself in 2. In the Grecian myths, we have the legend of Cupid and Psyche, which came down to us as Beauty and the Beast. Show you the reading. Edgar Casey said, when somebody said, is it a destiny of, this is a pretty traditional person, the woman's body to return to the rib of man and so forth, he said, with this we touch upon delicate subjects upon what much might be said respecting the necessity of the union of forces which are divided in the earth in sex. And he says, in the heavenly realm, you become as one, in the union of that of which ye have been the portion from the beginning. So it was basically that it was a force that separated itself into 2 energies, rather than somebody being the rib of someone else, which is sort of a nicer way to look at it. And it's interesting that was the reference in the early Hebrew, is that it was really the side of this being. That 2-in-1 soul that may have separated into Adam and Eve was called Amelius in the Casey readings, which is 2-in-1, and then it became Adam and Eve. So everyone living, every creature would have that. It would just be the polarization. In the earth, we're separated for reproduction and so forth. But in higher realms, we become as one, although each soul is complete, and unique unto themselves. I was going to share with you a few examples of twin souls or famous people who've searched out this concept. Further examples, Abraham and Sarah in the Bible, Abelard and Heloise in France, Adam and Eve, Mary and Jesus, interestingly enough. In the Casey readings, gets kind of, not everyone agree with this, but it's implied that Mary and Jesus might have even been Adam and Eve. It says in the Bible that Jesus is was the first Adam. Mark Twain searched out the concept of twin souls and found himself, as I mentioned earlier, with his twin soul in dreams in Hawaii, in Greece. Marilyn Monroe, who's thought of as being so overtly sexual, she actually had 3 husbands, and she often wore garlic to ward off their sexual advances. But I had a friend who had the same doctor, my friend who just passed away, shared a doctor with Marilyn Monroe in Los Angeles, and she used to go to her, it was a little woman doctor, and she would go to the doctors, and they had a thin partition separating the examining room from the waiting room, a transom it was called. And she would sit there and listen to Marilyn Monroe, who was also a client of the doctor. And Marilyn, for all her overt sexuality that the screen portrayed her to have, she kept talking about wanting to find a spiritual mate, somebody that was a true and spiritual affinity to her. So she had that drive and that desire. The poet Byron, Goethe, Dante, Swedenborg, and Wagner, who wrote the opera Tristan and Isolde, are also examples of people who have believed in twin souls. Any questions?
You're saying that person has to earn the right?
That's what it said in the Casey readings, that you earn the right to believe in twin souls.
To believe or to meet your twin soul?
To believe in to come to the point in consciousness where you believe in it is sort of a part of evolution on some people's paths. But not to have to meet your twin soul. You don't earn the right to that. That's something that apparently it's soul choice, and some say like every 1 1/3 lifetime we might actually be married. I don't know if in the other ones we know them in other relationships, but I'll share this with you. Does desire carry from one lifetime to another? You are always you, and although you may be outgoing in one expression and very shy in another, desire does carry and will eventually fulfill itself, whether on the physical, the mental, the material, or the spiritual levels. The materialist will attract those things which he or she desires materially. And the lonely in heart will find the true mate, the lonely in spirit will find God. So that what you desire, if you're seeking that comes to you through your desire also, and through soul choice, I think, when the opportunity comes to be together. But you have been with your twin soul in many different relationships throughout time, whether it's as brother and sister, husband and wife, sweethearts, mother and son, father and daughter, platonic friends who could only write to one another. In the case of a certain couple I know, you would have many and varied experiences with your twin soul throughout your various lifetimes. And remember, the heart knows and the soul never forgets, and that's how you really know inwardly. Any further questions on twin souls? So if you met someone you wondered if they were a twin soul, you would look for some general similarity of body structure. You know, not that you're absolutely identical carbon copies of one another, but there would be a general structural and possibly even facial similarity. Some twin souls, they might say, gee, that person looks enough like you to maybe be in your family or be a brother or a cousin or something like that. And there would be telepathy. You would pick up on each other's emotions, or maybe even a spiritual or mental telepathy between you. Strong attraction. You can have that with people you've had karma with. Sometimes that's how the magnet works. You're very attracted. But we meet people, we have leftover karma from other past lives. So it can be that also. And the feeling of a burst of sunrise in your life and being answers to each other and really clicking. So,
can you click and it be bad? Or would this be only good for you?
it would be basically good for you, really. I mean, you can have karma like those that were those twin souls who had a partner and have a little jealousy over each other's accomplishments. If we were perfect, we wouldn't be here. So you're not necessarily going to meet a god or goddess in your twin soul, but a human being.
In that case that you were talking about, where one killed the other, as far as karma goes, my understanding of karma, that would they not come back in another lifetime, and quite possibly it would be the reverse. The other would kill, and so.
Or something like that.
Yeah,
and very true, because if that's true, the person who tuned into her past life, if he really did kill her as her twin brother in Greece, and they came back later as Elizabeth and Robert Browning, who wrote about Greece, he lost her when he was madly in love with her and lived his whole life alone. She died of TB. So right there, he cut off his own opportunity to be with his twin soul.
And sometimes the karma that each of the twin souls have may not be conducive to a good relationship?
I don't know. What do you think, Joe? Here's
I
the
think,
person.
you know, we each generate our own karma, and the two lives are independent. I mean, the purposes are similar, you know, there's joint purposes and things like that. But we can each, being human, accumulate our own problems. Those could conflict.
You might see some of your own extremes
Yeah.
reflected in the other person. My friend Jessica was something of a romantic, you know, and she did experience karma with her twin soul in some past lives, and they weren't able to marry in this lifetime, and it was somewhat karmic, but she remained a romantic to the end, you know. So I think that's something I can't give an absolute answer. I think you would meet some karma with your twin soul, even with your twin soul. Some karmic paths and patterns. It's maybe just the idea that although we are all part of a oneness, we are all really one in essence, there are some relationships that are at the closest, and this really would be the most close answer and complement to yourself. Perhaps even some of the weak points are things you really need to learn from. That could be a way of looking at it too.
And then also, since we each choose what sex we will be in each lifetime, does that necessarily go that your twin soul
Will always be the opposite sex. I've read different things on it. Now, Jessica's work, she suggested that you sort of kept one pole or the other one, and that you might have most of your lives, if you're a feminine polarity, as a woman, and then cross over sometimes for a certain experience, and vice versa. You know, a man might cross over for a certain experience. I did read a place in Edgar Cayce. He said that the sex we are in this realm, I read that recently, may be different in other realms, and that there can be, you know, some changing of it even here. So it's not. That's another thing. We shouldn't, by the Cayce philosophy, we should hold no prejudice to anyone of a different race, because you can. That's the best way to find yourself exactly in that race, and nor should we have too much gender prejudice by sex, or you know, toward a person of the opposite sex, because we can find ourselves in all the roles of life. So I like that. I think it has a positive message for us as we approach the new age. But you can. Jonathan and David in the Bible may have been twin souls, because it says in the Bible that David loved Jonathan as his own soul. And one person's feeling is that at that time women were not allowed to go in battle. Maybe in Israel today they can, but they couldn't then. And suppose Jonathan and David both needed to be in those twin souls needed to be in battle. Perhaps Jonathan had been a woman more frequently, but chose to come in a male body in order to be with her or his twin soul for that one experience. So,
what about, this is a reverse of twin souls, when you meet people in your life that you just immediately cannot stand.
yeah, your karmic enemy of the past has come back to your doorstep. One thing too that says if you can't work it out with somebody karmically, what can happen is that you find yourself born right in their house as their relative. Anybody have people in their lives like that? If you can't, your higher self says, gee, these people will not work it out, we'll just put them right in the house together. This would be you had, as Cayce said, you had disputed the passage before. You two had made big waves together, and you know it the minute you see that person. So, of course, sometimes too, if we've had hurts in our early childhood, a person can remind us a lot of someone. You know, that's another reason we can have an instant dislike. But oftentimes we are meeting ourselves, and that's what Cayce said a lot with us, is we are meeting ourselves. The people in our lives that get us down, that we can't stand their little habits and ways. Not too long ago, or now, we were this way, and we're meeting the self that we were, coming back. The people in our lives who uplift us, who are friends from the day we meet, and have lovely talents we admire, these are ourselves. We're meeting ourselves, which leads into the next topic. We're going to have to move along here, I guess we're going to move into how to discover your own past lives. And we have a lot of stuff to go. Okay. Where do I want to do that next? Now before we do that, we're going to sort of go quickly and do a little exercise for safe psychic development from the Edgar Cayce viewpoint. Do you have the blue handouts, Joe? Can you give everybody one? Are you interested also in a meditation exercise? Do you all meditate? Do you want to, are you familiar? Do you feel you don't? I could give you a short meditation technique that could be helpful. Does that interest you, or do you feel like, okay. All right, so we're going to go a little condensed here now. Casey said it's not what the mind knows, but what the mind applies about what it knows that makes for soul, mental, or material advancement. So it's not necessarily going around and learning everything you can about metaphysics only. It's what you can do and actually use that actually makes you grow spiritually. And I wanted to touch a little bit on ideals and leading into a little meditation exercise. What is meditation? Casey said it's not musing, not daydreaming, but as ye find your bodies made up of physical, mental, and spiritual, it is a tuning of the mental and the physical body to its spiritual source. Through the will, we ask the mind of our physical body to cease its wanderings and center itself upon the ideal, which will be presented to the higher self. To meditate safely and to get into any kind of psychic development safely, we were asking about, grounding and safety and protection. This is a little bit of a different slant on it, but paraphrasing something Casey said, as we in meditation open ourselves to the unseen forces that surround the throne of grace, beauty, and might within ourselves, let us throw around us the protection found in the thought of our ideal. In other words, as you open up to the psychic, the meditative state, it's important to have like a shining light that's your protection and your guide. And certainly, just watch TV this last week. There's everything out there right now, and maybe we don't know exactly how we feel about all of it. There are many different people channeling entities, and there are people on spiritual journeys, and how do we know, if we get into this, that we're not going to get so far out on a limb we'll fall off or something, How do we know when we need to explore further, and how do we... And it's really important to have, Casey suggested, to define what your ideal is, and that's what we're going to work with. What is an ideal? Each individual entity, whether aware of same or not, sets before itself an ideal in the material world, in the mental world, and in the spiritual world. We need a place to stand, to return to, a sense of stability, a way of getting centered, something in which we have confidence and faith. What I'd like you to work with now with these handout sheets is to choose your spiritual ideal, and this is not to give to anyone else. Now, if you do this later at home, we have more time, or 6 months from now, it might change a little bit, but I'd like you to come up with one word that's for you, gives you a stable place to stand, a motivation, a measure for your life. Not a word that someone else would require of you or tell you, not something from outside, but inside yourself. In other words, give some examples. On that sheet, it shows you, like you look at the bottom for examples. First of all, in the center wheel, you're going to write what would be your spiritual ideal. And this is an example that one person came up with. This word should be something that in the spiritual part of life, the highest thing you can think of, represents to you something really high that you want to attain to, that you feel is important to manifest in your life. And a lot of people, religiously oriented, they might pick something like Jesus or Mary or Buddha, love, a person, brotherhood or sisterhood of humanity, service. One person picked courage. I don't know. It's something that to you has real inner meaning inside of you. So I'd like you to take a moment, if you will, and just sort of relax and listen to your own inner being. Think of what is meaningful to you right now.